All right, welcome back. We had a very interesting week last week in the stock market. It was headlined by the Greenland news. Some people are calling it the taco news from Greenland, as we had some of the aggressive talks with Greenland kind of backtracked during the week. Trump gave a speech at Davos, and he was a little bit more friendly towards the Greenland negotiations, and the market liked that, because earlier in the week when he was very aggressive, the market didn't like that uncertainty. But we've seen this before. I think this will be a back and forth issue, and we'll see how things settle out. With Davos, we had a lot of interesting interviews last week. It was definitely a very business deal-making focused kind of theme for Davos, which is a little bit different shift from what it's had in the past. So that was very interesting. And we did have some economic numbers last week, but nothing that really jumped off the page. We have a huge week coming up this week. So we've got earnings, Microsoft, Tesla, Meta, Apple, all coming out next week. And then we also have the Federal Reserve decision. Are they going to cut rates? Right now, the prediction markets are not expecting a rate cut next week, but the speech will be very interesting, especially with the recent Jerome Powell lawsuit. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions about that, and then also how the Fed is looking at rate cuts for 2026. We do have some tensions in the Middle East starting to heat up towards the end of the week and over the weekend. So we're seeing energy prices start to move back up. Again, volatility is yo-yoing up and down day by day. Things are looking like they're percolating up, and then things cool off, and then they just keep bouncing up and down. With that, the materials are continuing to move. We'll look at some of the commodity prices, but gold and silver, all-time highs. We'll take a look at those charts in a moment, but definitely just a lot more volatility to the upside and the downside. So it'll be a very interesting week, as we've got a lot of news hitting the tape next week. So the heat map here, pretty red across the board. We did see a rebound in some names like AMD, Meta, and the energy names, they get a nice boost. But across the board here, pretty red. A lot of technology names, deep red, a lot of software names in the red. Nvidia was down, Apple was down, Google was down. The financials were down off of earnings, and again, the credit card 10% cap potential for the interest that credit cards will charge. And just across the board here, pretty red week this week. So let's take a look at some names here. We'll start off with the commodities. Again, gold all-time high, almost 5,000 per ounce of gold, and silver at 103. So just parabolic charts. Copper also with a strong move over the last handful of months. And then natural gas was the big winner this week. Natural gas was up, I think it was 60% or so on the week. Yep, 60% on the week. Some of that is due to the cold front that's hitting the United States. So we'll see if this continues to break out, and we'll see what this does for inflation down the road. So volatility this week, we did kind of bounce up and down. We had a nice spike early in the week, and then we gave all that back, but definitely looking like we have the potential for another spike up. But any spike that we get in the VIX, as we've seen in the past, it's always short-lived. So have your shopping list ready and be prepared when we do get these VIX spikes to buy your favorite names when they are on sale. Bond market, not doing a whole lot here. Be very interesting to see with the Federal Reserve meeting, but we have had interest rates slowly climb back up. So be interesting to see with the Fed meeting where we go from here. Now let's take a look at some of the names here. Let's pull up the S&P 500. Again, we had a dump early in the week, and then we regained our ground for a total flat week this week. And a lot of the charts are going to look similar to that. Some names that we were going to talk about. Intel had earnings. Where is Intel? Intel had earnings, was down 17% post-earnings. I still need to listen to their call, but their revenue came in line and their earnings came in line. But Intel has been on a huge run, so this looks like profit taking. We'll see where we go from there. Netflix also had earnings. It was down a handful of percent, but it regained some of that after their earnings. This looks like it wants to hit $70, but we'll have to wait and see. Again, this is all waiting for resolution on the Paramount and HBO deal. So some big names next week going into earnings. We've got Tesla. Tesla had a red week to start, and then it shot up at the end of the week. Tesla did launch unsupervised robotaxi in Austin, and so that's some of the optimism coming in there. And then you can also see some negativity on a name like Uber. People are worried that robotaxi and Waymo will eat into Uber's pie. So anytime we hear positive news for robotaxi or Waymo, we see Uber take a hit. Let's see who else has earnings next week. We've got Apple and Microsoft. So Apple down again this week. It is down 15% from its high, and not sure where we go from here. It'd be very interesting to see what they say in their earnings call, what new products are coming out. Microsoft had a rebound this week. No news there, but just bouncing back up. And then same thing here for Meta. Nice rebound this week. So earnings will be the big mover for these names. And then obviously FOMC and geopolitical news is always going to be in the headlines. When it comes to geopolitical and political news, anytime there's a sell-off due to that, to me, those are buying opportunities. If a company is selling off because its earnings or fundamentals are changing, that's where you really want to be concerned. Obviously, if there's a prolonged war, that's going to be bad for everybody. But as we've seen in the past, when the market reacts to geopolitical or political news, it's a short-term reaction, and over the long term, if you're buying quality businesses on those drops, it tends to work out pretty well. So I will take advantage of those volatility spikes when we get them. Obviously, we don't want any catastrophes around the world, but those are some opportunities that the market will provide you. And then with earnings, there's going to be a ton of volatility there. So I'm not as quick to react to negative news after earnings, because I want to do the due diligence myself and see why the market doesn't like it. And if I think it's being mispriced, then I'll make a play. So with the volatility that we're going to continue to see, be patient. And I would say right now there's a handful of C or maybe even B opportunities out there. There's not a lot of A opportunities. So I will let you know when I see some of those A opportunities. But handful of names that are interesting, like Amazon dropping here on the geopolitical news. To me, that's a buying opportunity. Same thing with something like Google and Nvidia. But if they drop after an earnings report, then that's when I'm a little bit more cautious and I want to look into the numbers and make my decision from there. So big week next week. I will keep you guys informed. Maybe we'll have a couple videos throughout the week because there's a lot happening next week. Until then, go Seahawks and have a great weekend. Peace out.